Nazi memorabilia, including a statue of Adolf Hitler, among the items going for auction later this week in County Wicklow. Auctioneer Stuart Purcell joins us now. Good morning, Stuart.
Morning, Pat. How are you?
I'm very well. This is happening at Mullen's at Laurel Park in Bray. I know it well. It's on the way to Woodbrook Golf Club. So tell me, what have you got on sale?
Well, we have it's a sale of historical memorabilia, militaria, sporting memorabilia, and we call it the collector's cabinet. So it's anything that we're catering to collectors. We sell their collections and we offer their collections for sale to other collectors. So we're the middleman between them.
So the Nazi memorabilia that you have on sale comes from some collectors, some Irish collectors.
Two collectors. One who's a big collector of militaria, and another who was his principal interest was collecting photographs. He collected the photograph albums of German soldiers, and there are a couple of dozen of albums of photographs that these soldiers took when they were in the field or on duty during the war, and it was they put their captions in it. So they're historical documents, and they show the soldiers' movements around Europe and the kind of equipment they were dealing with and the barracks they were in and the places they visited and so on. So that was his principal interest, but he had other items as well that were related to his collection. And they, collectors in their nature, they tend to be quite academic. They become interested in the Second World War, for instance, and as children, I presume, and through comics and so on, and they end up collecting in the area. And some of them gravitate towards collecting medals. Some of them gravitate towards collecting maybe field equipment. Others will collect badges and uniform items, and they're typically what they bring to us to sell on their behalf, or in this case, their children bring to us to sell on the behalf of a deceased collector.
I mean, the guide prices on some of these things do not seem particularly high. Statue of Hitler in uniform between 100 and 150 euro. Plaque.
Well, that's a really interesting object. I mean, what we're looking at, I suppose, is the indoctrination of Germany in the 1930s when you look at an object like that, because it's very cheaply made. It's a kind of a brass statue. It's very kind of, the brass is almost foil thin in it. It's filled with tar or something like that to give it weight, but it's designed to be sold to somebody who didn't have a lot of money, and they could display it in their house to show they supported the party and whatever. It was very much an object like that. It's an interesting object, but it's not. I mean, it's not an object of any particular quality.
They were probably manufactured in their hundreds of thousands. A plaque of Hitler, a cast iron novelty money box in the form of Hitler saluting. Put
Again,
money
that would
in.
Probably come from the other side. That would have been a propaganda item, where you would probably made in Britain or America, where you put your coin in Hitler's mouth, and then you press the button and he salutes. So it was making a mockery of Hitler rather than trying to aggrandize him like the other items were.
Yeah. I was reading a lot of stuff in Ronan McCreevy's article, which is very, very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff, Hitler Youth and League of German Girls uniforms, Nazi badges, Nazi Party rally armband, bust of Benito Mussolini. Is there any kind of ethical issue about putting these items up for sale? Just to because they are Nazi memorabilia.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would consider them to be historical memorabilia first and foremost, and I think they tell a very important story. In particular, when you're talking about not necessarily the war era, but the period before the war, the rise of fascism, which is probably the most important historical event of the 20th century, and these items all tell a story. The item you mentioned from the League of German Girls are actually two cardigans that were knitted by two young girls as part of their uniform when they joined the League of German Girls, and they would have been, maybe judging by the size of the cardigans, they were 10, 11, 12 years old. They knitted these uniform cardigans. They're black cardigans with little green and red stripes on them, and they wore those as part of they were effectively joining what the Girl Scouts of Germany of the 1930s, and they but they were being indoctrinated into National Socialism and fascism and so on. And so I think they tell a very important story about how these events unfolded in the 1930s in Germany.
So no matter how distasteful people feel any aspect of the Nazi era might be, you feel that their historical importance is such that they can be and should be collected.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what the alternative is to ignore them, pretend it didn't happen, and then how do we tell the story of the League of German Girls, unless you've got maybe one of their cardigans to show somebody and say, that's, certainly I knew nothing about the League of German Girls before I encountered the cardigan that passed across my desk from this collection. So, I find most of these collectors are really academic, very scholarly, many of them, and most of them are, quite seriously devoted to exploring a particular area of collecting in that field. And I mean, most of my collectors don't collect any of this. German.
I'm just wondering, though, to what extent it is the recycling of these images, the Nazi symbols, the swastika, and so on, by the extreme anti-Semitic far right.
I think the idea that there are neo-fascists out there amassing collections to worship at the shrine is, I think that's fictional, really. I mean, maybe there are those people out there, but they'd be finding the stuff no matter where it was, how available it was or not. I think certainly I don't know any of them coming to bid at auction or so on there. I mean, as I say, it's historical memorabilia, and I don't want to get too focused on Nazi memorabilia. We have some amazing historical memorabilia in the sale. I have the cutlery that Michael Collins used at his last meal in Skibbereen in 1922 on the day he was assassinated, is in the auction. We have a blanket from the H blocks in the auction. We have the chair that the captain of the guard at the signing of the Boer War Treaty sat on, with a little brass plaque on the front of it. He was a Corkman, a Royal Munster Fusilier, and the chair he brought back from South Africa is in the sale. So there's an amazing collection of stuff in the sale. The sporting memorabilia is fantastic. Just because we're selling some German memorabilia from the 1930s doesn't mean we're Nazi supporters. If we're selling a Manchester United shirt, it doesn't make us Manchester United supporters, thank God.
Mightn't fetch much this morning. All right.
Really feel sorry for them, wouldn't you?
Stuart, thank you very much for joining us. Stuart Mullen with Mullen's Auctioneers. And if you want to check out what they have in that auction, mullenslaurelpark.com is where you'll find them. That auction taking place on Saturday, March the 11th, starting at 10 a.m.